Italian cinema is just sort of what I'm interested in, which is why I don't even know if this will take 5 minutes. So, Italian cinema it began in the silent era, and actually Italy was kind of one of the front runner. Well, it wasn't really a front runner of silent film, but it was kind of one of the major countries producing silent film, such that when there was sort of the shift to sound, all of the sets were kind of constructed for silent films, and so they continued to be dubbed well into the 1960s because of these film sets that had been constructed. And because of this, there's sort of, I guess I'm not really going chronologically anymore, but the actors in many Italian films were not Italian often, but they were American or French or English, etc., etc. And so you got this very kind of interesting international dimension with a lot of Italian films, where there would be a lot of kind of collaboration with different people of different nationalities, and also it was kind of a very organic process of making films, wherein the script was never finalized until actually everything had been shot, and then the director would go in and change things, and this happened a lot in like Fellini's movies, for example. So anyway, I sort of jumped around, but I would say that like Italian cinema kind of really started to get going during the fascist period, and actually Mussolini kind of instituted this big push in cinema, and there was the construction of basically the Italian Hollywood, which is called Cinecittà, and actually it's still used today for a lot of films, and there are films made in Italy that are, how much time do I have?
Oh, my bad. 3 minutes.
Okay, not very much. That are filmed exclusively in Cinecittà, and along with this, basically, Mussolini was using cinema to produce propaganda films, but in the process, so much money was going into this that it provided training for a whole new current of filmmakers, and that was sort of the beginning of like art cinema for Italy, because during the Second World War, these filmmakers who had been trained basically making propaganda films for Mussolini, they basically Italy was completely impoverished by this war. So from 1943 to 1945, there was sort of the beginning of a new film movement, which is extremely famous, called Italian neorealism, which went on to influence all sorts of movements all over the world. In India, the auteur Satyajit Ray, for instance, was very influenced by this. The Black independent movement at UCLA in the late 1970s. Even like current American independent films like the mumblecore movement sort of, I guess, inspired by this in some way, because basically Italy was sort of in a third world state. It was completely impoverished. No one had money for actors or for crew, so everything was filmed on location. The actors were basically just people picked up from the street. The crew didn't really know what they were doing, but these are some of the, they're still considered like some of the best movies ever made, like Bicycle Thieves and Umberto D, and then there's like this, there's like Rome Open City, and this is, kind of, Rossellini is very famous for this, and De Sica. These are kind of the two major filmmakers. And so then from this, Fellini was actually, he was working for Rossellini and writing films for him, and working on many of his films. So you can see that like fascism kind of led to neorealism, and neorealism kind of led to sort of the apex of Italian cinema, which was Fellini, Antonioni, Pasolini, Visconti, these kinds of filmmakers during the 1960s, with 8½, and La Dolce Vita, and Antonioni had a trilogy that was very famous, and so this was sort of like 20 seconds left. They had a lot of attention to aesthetic detail. They weren't as cheaply made as the neorealist films, but there was still the same emphasis on kind of realistic portrayals of intimate aspects of reality, and a departure from a focus on plot. There was kind of more of an illustration of a specific human existence. And cinema declined during the 1980s, and it's not really the same. That's it.